My name is Eber Devine. I am a lifelong resident of the city of Philadelphia. I am a political activist, political consultant. I first became interested in politics when I was a kid. Actually, I remember when, I'm dating myself, but I remember when Jimmy Carter was running against Gerald Ford for the presidency back in the 70s. And I was just fascinated by the whole process. I was glued to the television the whole time. And I've always had an interest in how our political system works. But to bring it current, so one of my main passions is making sure that the system works for those of us or those folks who don't have access to, let's say, they don't have access to the mainstream media per se to get their message out. So my thing is we need to have a venue, we need to have a way to disseminate information to people that don't have that access. I am currently a student at Temple University. I'm pursuing a degree in political science. I am very interested in learning the mechanics, and not just learning it, but taking the information back to the community and sharing that information with our community. Because like one of the things we're seeing is people are really uninformed as to how their political system works. Let me just give you, for instance, I was sitting in an American government class, state and local politics course, right here at this university. And the professor did a survey of how many people actually knew who their state senator was, who their state representative was, who the mayor was. And only a small percentage of students actually knew who represented them in the government. And across the board, you know, not just in the universities, but in our neighborhoods, you know, unfortunately, that's the situation. You know, a lot of people are just disconnected and disengaged from the process. And, you know, it's easy for us to say the system is broken, but a major reason why the system is broken is because of the lack of participation, the lack of interest in the overall process. Now, you might say, well, I'm not interested in politics. I don't want to participate in politics. And that is a person's prerogative. But every time you pay taxes, every time you buy something, every time your child goes to school, every time you make a purchase at the store, you are participating in a political process. When you stop at a red light, you're participating in a political process. The difference is that when you're engaged and you're aware, then you can actually have a voice in how resources are allocated and how the decisions that our representatives make are going to impact you and your family. So my grandmother, Maggie Devine, was my primary motivator in terms of getting engaged in the civic engagement. So my grandmother was very close to her neighbors. She was very involved in her block and her community. Everybody knew Miss Maggie, everybody knew my grandmother. And when she passed away back in 2006, you know, I was really heartbroken. And one of the things that I made a determination in myself to do was to continue to work in that neighborhood and be a part of the neighborhood and to be involved with the neighbors, kind of sort of on her behalf, you know. But my grandmother was really my inspiration when I actually ran for committee person in 2006, and I actually became an elected Democratic committee person in the 47th Ward, 9th Division. Now, I had been involved in politics up until that point, but You know, it was a transitional period in my life, actually, when I became a committee person and I started working with people on the ground. I started, you know, going to community meetings. I started taking on community issues, you know, when lots needed to be cleaned up or there was nuisance issues going on and people didn't know who to call. Well, I made sure my constituents had my numbers. I made sure all of the people, you know, in my division, I tried my best to get out to people so that they could have somebody who they could interface with that would be concerned about their issues. So I really, I think that was the impetus. But you know, one of the greatest thrills I get, you know, one of the greatest feelings I get is when somebody come to me with a problem, with the issue, and you know, I can help them. You know, I could go take them to their state representative, or I could take the issue to one of the council people. These are the things that really make working in the political process worthwhile, because, you know, there's a lot that goes on in politics. And, you know, I think the negative connotation is more broadly, you know, broadcast than the positive things that happen in politics. There's a lot of good things that happen politically, you know, that, you know, help people and help allocate resources in places that they need to go. The system is not perfect, you know, but it works when we participate and when good people are concerned and when good people bring issues to the table. You know, that's how we begin to solve the issue. You know, we can't solve the issue if people, you know, say, well, I just don't want to be involved. So, you know, they just throw their hands up. You know, one of the things that, you know, I say many hands lighten the load. One of the things that would really help our community is if some of the people who say, you know what, I don't want to be involved in the political system. Well, I can understand, you know, I'm going to be honest, I understand that, because there's some things that are really not, I want to say they're not, you know, politics is a contact sport. I'll put it that way. It's a contact sport. And the deeper you go in, the more risk you take in certain areas. But if your motives are good, if your motives are to help people, then I think that's what you need to focus on. You know, now, you know, and let's just call politics what they are. Politics is the allocation of resources. It's who gets what and when. That's what determines, politics is what determines how the cake is going to be cut and how big the slices are going to be and who's going to get a slice. So, okay, so when we talk about the cake, we're talking about the school district, we're talking about our roads, we're talking about services, we're talking about all of the things that affect our lives in the city of Philadelphia.